Disclaimer: this program contains graphic descriptions of real crimes. Viewer discretion is advised. All parties are presumed innocent until proven guilty in court. She didn't lose her womb to sickness. She lost it to the man who once promised to protect her. 5 pregnancies, 5 graves, and when her body finally gave up, he divorced her and married another woman. Miriam was 23 when she married Daniel Kofa, and everyone said she was lucky. He was calm, polite, God-fearing, the kind of man who greeted elders with respect and spoke softly during church meetings. When he smiled, people believed him. When he promised, they trusted him. Miriam trusted him too. She believed love was supposed to feel safe. She believed marriage meant shelter. She believed that once the ring touched her finger, she would finally belong somewhere that couldn't hurt her. Their wedding day was filled with laughter. White fabric lined the walls, music echoed through the hall. Daniel held her waist tightly as they danced, his fingers pressing just a little harder than necessary. She thought it was excitement. The first night in their new home, Daniel kissed her forehead and told her she was his forever. His voice was gentle, his eyes were serious, but forever didn't take long to change. 3 months later, Miriam asked a simple question about a phone call that ended too quickly. Daniel's face hardened in a way she had never seen before. "Don't question me," he said. She laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. His hand moved faster than her thoughts. The slap wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it shattered something inside her that never fully healed. Daniel stared at her frozen body, then stepped back like he was surprised by his own action. He apologized, he cried. He said stress made him lose control. He said she pushed him. Miriam believed him. That night, she covered the mark with makeup and told herself marriage required patience, that love sometimes hurt before it healed. She didn't know that was the first bruise of many. Over time, his words became sharper, his silence heavier, his anger unpredictable. He controlled what she wore, who she spoke to, where she went. Every disagreement ended the same way. Her voice gone, his fists remembered. Still, Miriam stayed. Because she believed a baby would fix everything. When she found out she was pregnant, she cried tears of relief. She imagined tiny fingers wrapped around hers. She imagined Daniel smiling again. She imagined a home filled with laughter instead of fear. She didn't know her pregnancy had already been marked for loss. Miriam protected her pregnancy the way someone protects a secret. She walked carefully, ate slowly, spoke softly. She tried not to breathe too loud around Daniel. For a few weeks, he was calm, almost kind. He placed a hand on her stomach once, briefly, like he was testing something fragile. "But not precious. You better not mess this up," he said. Those words followed her everywhere. At night, Miriam lay awake listening to Daniel breathe beside her, wondering how love could feel so cold. She whispered prayers into the darkness, begging God to let this baby live. She believed if she could give Daniel a child, he would stop hurting her. She believed wrong. The argument started over food. She had cooked rice instead of yam. Daniel said she was careless, ungrateful, disrespectful. Her heart raced. She apologized quickly, placing her hand over her stomach. "I'm sorry," she said. "Please, I'm pregnant." That word angered him. "You think pregnancy gives you power." He snapped. Before she could step back, his fist drove into her abdomen, once, then again. She fell to the floor, gasping, her body curling instinctively around the life inside her. Daniel stood over her, breathing hard, then walked away like nothing had happened. Pain spread through her lower body like fire. That night, blood soaked the bedsheets. At the hospital, the lights were too bright. Doctors spoke in low voices. Nurses avoided her eyes. Daniel held her hand and told them she slipped in the bathroom. No one questioned him. The doctor finally said the word Miriam feared most, miscarriage. She felt empty instantly, like something had been ripped from her soul. She cried silently, her tears soaking into the pillow. Daniel stood at the foot of the bed, his face blank. On the way home, he didn't say a word. That night, he broke the silence. "You couldn't even hold on to one pregnancy," he said. "What kind of woman loses her own child?" Miriam stared at the wall, unable to speak. She mourned alone, no funeral, no goodbye, just pain buried deep inside her body. Weeks later, Daniel acted like nothing had happened. He laughed with friends, attended church, accepted condolences like sympathy was owed to him. Miriam carried the grief quietly, but grief wasn't enough for Daniel. He wanted control, and soon he would get another chance. Time passed, but the house never softened. Miriam learned how to survive inside silence. She learned which footsteps meant danger and which doors to avoid when Daniel's mood shifted. She learned how to speak with her eyes lowered and her voice small. The second pregnancy came quietly. She didn't tell Daniel right away. She hid the test under folded clothes and prayed in whispers. She was careful in a way fear teaches you to be. When Daniel found out, he didn't smile. "You're pregnant again?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "You think you deserve another chance." From that moment, the beatings returned, harder, more frequent, more intentional. He accused her of trying to trap him, of embarrassing him with her weak body, of costing him money with hospital visits. One night, after she forgot to warm his water, he pushed her. She tumbled down the stairs, her body hitting each step with a dull thud. The miscarriage came the next morning. The third pregnancy ended even faster. By then, Miriam no longer cried. She bled quietly, cleaned herself, went back to cooking and cleaning like nothing had happened. Daniel grew crueler. He stopped hiding his violence. Kicks replaced slaps. Insults replaced apologies. During the fourth pregnancy, he locked her outside during a storm for talking back. Rain soaked her clothes as she curled on the ground, hands wrapped around her stomach, whispering apologies to a child who never had a chance. By dawn, the bleeding started again. 4 pregnancies, 4 losses. By the 5th time, Miriam didn't hope. She was afraid. Her body felt fragile. Her spirit felt hollow. Doctors warned her that another pregnancy could be dangerous. Daniel ignored them. "You will give me a child," he said, "or you are nothing." The 5th pregnancy became a sentence. Daniel hit her where it hurt most, her abdomen. He knew exactly what he was doing. One night, after accusing her of cheating, he beat her until she couldn't stand. The pain didn't stop this time. She collapsed, barely conscious, blood pooling beneath her. When she woke up, bright lights burned her eyes. A doctor leaned over her bed, his face heavy with fear and urgency. "We're losing her," he told the nurses. They rushed her into surgery, and when Miriam woke again, her body felt empty in a way she had never known before. Miriam woke up slowly, like her body was unsure if it wanted to return. The room smelled of disinfectant. Machines hummed softly beside her bed. Her throat was dry. Her stomach felt heavy, but empty at the same time. She tried to move and pain shot through her lower body. A nurse noticed her stirring and rushed over. She adjusted the drip and told her to stay still. Miriam searched the room with her eyes. Daniel wasn't there. Hours passed before a doctor finally came in. He didn't smile. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and spoke carefully, like each word weighed something. "We had to act fast," he said. "Your injuries were severe. There was too much internal damage." Miriam swallowed hard. "What about my baby?" she whispered. The doctor hesitated. "I'm sorry," he said. "You lost the pregnancy." Her eyes filled with tears, but she had expected that. Loss was familiar. Then he continued. "To save your life, we had to remove your uterus." The words didn't make sense at first. Remove uterus, life. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the ceiling as reality settled into her bones. No more pregnancies, no more chances, no more children. The doctor apologized again, explaining complications, trauma, hemorrhaging. His voice faded into noise. Miriam turned her head away. Something inside her died quietly. Daniel still hadn't come. When he finally did, 2 days later, he stood at the door like a stranger. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask how she felt. "They said you can't have kids anymore," he said flatly. She nodded, his jaw tightened, his eyes filled with anger, not grief. "So what am I supposed to do now?" he asked. Miriam stared at him in disbelief. "I almost died," she whispered. "That's not my fault," he replied. You were weak." He turned and walked out. 3 weeks later, Miriam was served divorce papers. The reason was typed clearly in black ink: failure to bear children. Daniel didn't come to court with shame. He came with confidence. He told the judge his wife was medically unfit. He said he needed a family. He said he endured years of disappointment. Miriam sat silently, her hands trembling in her lap. No one asked how her womb was destroyed. No one asked how 5 pregnancies ended. The marriage ended quickly. Daniel remarried 6 months later. A younger woman, a wide smile, a full future. The church blessed them. Miriam watched from a distance as the life she lost was handed to someone else. After the divorce, Miriam returned to her parents' house with nothing but a small bag and a body that no longer felt like her own. People stared, some whispered, some avoided her, some smiled with pity that felt worse than hatred. They didn't ask what Daniel did. They asked what she did wrong. "Maybe you talk too much. Some women don't know how to keep a man. At least he didn't kill you. At least." Those words echoed in her head at night. Her room became a prison of memories. Every sound reminded her of fists. Every silence reminded her of loss. She woke up gasping, her hands clutching her stomach, forgetting, then remembering that there was nothing left to protect. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped speaking. Her mother would knock gently on the door, begging her to come out. Miriam stayed curled on the bed, staring at the wall, replaying every moment she could have run. Sometimes she imagined what her children would have looked like: 5 faces, 5 names, 5 lives that never took a breath. Guilt crushed her chest. One night, the pain became unbearable. She stood in the bathroom, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked empty, broken, useless. Just like Daniel said, she picked up a bottle of pills. Her hands shook as tears streamed down her face. She whispered apologies to children who never existed, to a body that failed her, to a future she would never have. Just then, a soft knock broke the silence. Her mother's voice trembled from the other side of the door. "Miriam, please." The pills slipped from her hands and scattered across the floor. She collapsed, sobbing. That night, she didn't die, but something else did: her silence. Days later, her cousin convinced her to attend a women's health seminar. Miriam didn't want to go. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't want to talk. She went anyway. She sat in the back, head lowered, listening half-heartedly, until a woman stepped forward and began to speak. She spoke about marriage, about love turning violent, about miscarriages caused by abuse. Miriam's heart began to race. The woman described bruises hidden under long sleeves, hospital visits explained away by lies, husbands who walked free while women buried grief alone. Miriam's hands started to shake. For the first time, she heard her own story spoken out loud by someone who survived. Tears streamed down her face. She wasn't cursed. She wasn't weak. She was abused, and for the first time since everything was taken from her. Miriam raised her head. Miriam didn't speak at the seminar. She listened. Every word from the woman at the front felt like it was being pulled from her own memories, the violence, the fear, the shame that kept women quiet long after the bruises faded. For the first time, Miriam understood something that changed everything. What happened to her had a name: abuse, not discipline, not marriage problems, not a woman's failure. Abuse. When the seminar ended, people stood up to leave. Miriam stayed seated, frozen, her heart pounding like it wanted to escape her chest. The speaker noticed her. She walked over slowly and knelt beside her chair. "You don't have to talk," she said gently. "But you're not alone." That night, Miriam couldn't sleep. She opened an old notebook and began to write. She wrote about the first slap, the first miscarriage, the stairs, the storms, the hospital lights. She wrote until her hand ached and her tears soaked the pages. By morning, the truth sat in front of her, written, undeniable, real. Days later, with her cousin beside her, Miriam walked into a police station. Her legs shook, her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She told them everything. The officer listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't question her pain. He asked for dates, medical records, names of hospitals. For the first time, someone treated her story like evidence, not gossip. The investigation didn't move fast. Daniel laughed when he heard, "She's bitter." He told anyone who would listen. "She wants revenge because she couldn't give me a child." But hospital files don't forget. Doctors don't forget, nurses don't forget. Medical reports showed repeated trauma, surgical notes described damage caused by blunt force, emergency visits lined up too neatly to be accidents. Neighbors came forward. So did a former friend who once heard screams through thin walls. Daniel's perfect image began to crack. When he was finally summoned, he arrived confident, until the questions started: dates, injuries. Contradictions. His calm slipped. Miriam sat across from him during questioning, her hands steady. He didn't look at her. She looked at him, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and authority. Miriam walked in with her cousin beside her, every step heavy with years of pain, but lighter than the silence she had carried for so long. Daniel entered shortly after, impeccably dressed, as if nothing had happened. His smile was practiced, confident, untouchable. The judge looked at the two of them and gestured for them to take their seats. For the first time in years, Miriam felt seen, not as the woman who lost her womb, and not as the failure, but as a person who had survived. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Photos of bruises, hospital records, medical reports detailing repeated trauma, witnesses, neighbors, friends, and nurses, testifying that Daniel's abuse was intentional, calculated, and relentless. Daniel's lawyers tried to spin the story. She's bitter. She wants revenge. She exaggerated injuries, but evidence is stubborn. Facts don't bend to lies. When Daniel was questioned, his confident mask began to crack. His voice trembled when asked about the fifth pregnancy. He avoided eye contact when the nurse described the repeated hospital visits. Miriam watched him closely. For years, she had lived in fear of this man. Now, he flinched under her gaze. The judge leaned forward. This court does not take domestic violence lightly. The testimony, records, and medical evidence are overwhelming. Daniel's face paled. He whispered to his attorney, his arrogance gone. Miriam felt a strange surge of power, not because she had destroyed him. She hadn't, because for the first time, truth had a voice. After hours of proceedings, the verdict came. Daniel was found guilty of repeated domestic abuse that led to bodily harm. There were no words that could restore her womb, no sentence that could bring back the children she lost. But Miriam realized something crucial. She had reclaimed her life. As the courtroom emptied, she walked out without looking back. Daniel's perfect life had cracks, but hers was hers again, and survival, that quiet, painful, miraculous survival, was justice enough. After the trial, Miriam returned home, not to a house filled with fear, but to a life she was slowly rebuilding. The first few months were quiet. She still flinched at raised voices. She still avoided mirrors that reminded her of what had been taken. But something had changed. She spoke more. She laughed cautiously. She walked outside without fear of eyes judging her. The memories didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled her. Miriam began speaking at women's groups, sharing her story to warn others. Abuse doesn't always leave marks you can see. Sometimes it steals your voice, your body, your hope. Don't stay silent. Her words resonated. Women wrote to her, hugged her, thanked her. Some left marriages they thought were love but were chains. Some sought help they had been too afraid to ask for. Miriam realized that speaking out was the ultimate act of defiance. Daniel had tried to erase her. He had taken her womb, 5 children, and her marriage, but he hadn't taken her voice. He hadn't taken her courage. He hadn't taken her truth. Miriam's advocacy became her mission. Every seminar, every conversation, every article she wrote was a reminder that survival is the loudest form of justice. One evening, she stood in front of a room of women at a support group. "Some wounds are invisible," she said, voice steady. "Some battles are quiet, but survival is loud, and it's ours, always ours." For the first time in years, Miriam smiled freely. She wasn't the woman Daniel tried to destroy. She was stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. Her life wasn't what she had imagined. It was better because now she could save herself and others, one story at a time. After the courtroom verdict, Daniel tried to return to the world as if nothing had happened. He smiled at church gatherings. He laughed at social events. He walked confidently in front of neighbors and friends, trying to convince everyone that he was the same perfect husband he had always appeared to be. But cracks were forming. People whispered. Friends who once admired him now cast wary glances. Colleagues began avoiding him when Miriam's name was mentioned. She didn't lie. One neighbor whispered quietly, "I heard the screams myself, and I saw the bruises." Daniel's carefully built image began to crumble. Every time Miriam's story appeared in the press, every time she gave a seminar or shared her testimony, his control weakened. He tried to defend himself with charm, public smiles, and excuses. But the public had already seen the truth. And while Daniel struggled to repair his reputation, Miriam's voice grew stronger. Every speech she gave, every interview she granted, every seminar she led reminded the world he had destroyed her body, but he could never destroy her courage. For the first time in years, Daniel was afraid. Afraid that the truth would continue to follow him. Afraid that the world would never forget the man behind the violence. And Miriam, she finally realized just how powerful it felt to no longer be afraid. Miriam's story could no longer be contained. A local news outlet ran a feature with a headline that would shock anyone who had ever assumed Daniel's perfection. 5 miscarriages, a stolen womb, and the husband who left her, one woman's fight against abuse. The article went viral. Social media lit up with outrage, empathy, and support for Miriam. Daniel's world began to crumble. Sponsors backed away. Church committees distanced themselves. Even friends he thought were loyal now whispered behind his back. He tried to issue statements defending himself. He claimed Miriam was bitter and vengeful, but the evidence was undeniable. Medical reports, witness testimony, and her powerful public speeches had already shifted public opinion. Every time Miriam spoke, every time the cameras focused on her, the man who once held her down felt smaller and smaller. For the first time, Miriam realized the truth could be more powerful than fear. Her pain, once a secret, had become her strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was reclaiming her life in full view of the world. And Daniel, he was learning that no mask could hide the man he truly was. Miriam's story resonated far beyond her own life. Messages poured in, letters, emails, social media DM. Some were desperate cries for help. Others were confessions of abuse long hidden. Some women simply wanted someone to hear their story. Each message reminded Miriam she wasn't alone, and neither were the thousands of women still trapped in silence. She began organizing small support groups in her community. Women who had been silenced for years came to share their experiences. Some had suffered abuse at the hands of husbands, brothers, or fathers. Some had hidden bruises, miscarriages, and secrets just like hers. Miriam became their voice, their mentor, their symbol of survival. Every meeting brought tears, hugs, and stories that had been too painful to tell, but it also brought hope. Every woman who spoke left empowered. Every woman who listened left inspired. For Miriam, it was healing in motion. Her own pain became a bridge for others, and every day Daniel's shadow grew smaller in her life, even as he tried in vain to maintain his public image. Because while he had stolen her womb and tried to destroy her marriage, he could never touch her courage or the movement it had sparked. Daniel wasn't used to being challenged. After Miriam's story went viral, he tried to fight back. He hired lawyers to issue public statements, calling her bitter, vengeful, and exaggerating the truth. He spoke to the press, claiming that the medical records had been misinterpreted, that Miriam wanted revenge, that she was trying to ruin his reputation. But the world had already seen the evidence: medical reports, hospital records, witness statements, testimonies from neighbors and friends. The public refused to believe his lies. Every attempt to defend himself only reminded them of the man he truly was, the one who had repeatedly harmed the woman he vowed to love. Miriam, meanwhile, grew stronger. She gave interviews, spoke at seminars, and responded calmly whenever anyone tried to slander her. Her composure contrasted sharply with Daniel's desperate defensiveness. The more he tried to control the narrative, the clearer it became. The story was no longer his to manipulate. Miriam had taken it back, and the truth was unstoppable. Miriam realized that surviving wasn't enough. Her story had power, and she decided to use it. She began traveling to schools, churches, and community centers, speaking to women and young girls about abuse. She taught them how to recognize the warning signs, how to protect themselves, and most importantly, that they were never alone. Every story she shared, every seminar she led, reminded her why she had survived. It was no longer about the miscarriages, the hospital visits, or Daniel's cruelty. It was about giving other women the tools to survive before it was too late. Her work inspired women who had lived in silence for years. Women reached out to her, seeking guidance, mentorship, and support. Each connection became another layer of healing for both Miriam and the women she helped. She began to understand that what Daniel had taken from her womb, her children, her marriage, didn't define her. What defined her now was the life she was building and the lives she was saving. Miriam's pain had transformed into purpose, and every time she spoke, Daniel's shadow shrank a little further. Daniel thought starting over with a new wife would erase his past. But it didn't. His new wife quickly noticed cracks in the man she had married. She noticed the way he flinched whenever Miriam's name came up. She noticed his whispered phone calls and secretive glances. She even noticed the tension in public gatherings. Friends and neighbors who had once admired him now avoided him, whispered behind his back, or shot him suspicious looks. Daniel tried to maintain control. He smiled, reassured his new wife, and continued attending social events as if everything was fine. But inside, he was unraveling. Every seminar Miriam led, every interview she gave, reminded the world of his past. Every public acknowledgement of domestic abuse chipped away at the illusion of perfection he had worked so hard to build. Meanwhile, his new wife grew wary. She began to question the man she had married, noticing inconsistencies in his stories and realizing that the man she thought was trustworthy had left a trail of pain and destruction. Daniel realized too late that his actions had consequences. His past wasn't something he could hide. Miriam's survival had exposed him, and no mask could protect him from the truth. Miriam's voice no longer belonged only to her. Her story had reached local government officials, and soon she was invited to participate in drafting programs to prevent domestic abuse. She shared her experiences, the hospital visits, the miscarriages, the lost womb, and the silenced years. She showed officials exactly how abuse works, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and socially. Her insight became the foundation for new initiatives, educational programs in schools, workshops in churches, and community awareness campaigns. Every seminar, every speech, every workshop she led reminded women that survival wasn't weakness, it was strength, it was courage, and it could save lives. Miriam finally understood what Daniel had tried to take from her. Her dignity, her voice, her future had been transformed into power. Power to change the lives of others. And every woman who walked out of her seminars empowered, aware, and courageous was proof that even in the darkest pain, there could be light. Daniel's attempts to rebuild his life and reputation were failing. Tabloids picked up his history of abuse. Social media users shared stories, screenshots, and excerpts from Miriam's speeches. Friends stopped inviting him to gatherings. Church groups refused him leadership roles. Sponsors and business associates quietly withdrew support. The man who once walked with arrogance and control now found himself isolated. Every attempt to defend himself only amplified the truth about the man he really was. Meanwhile, Miriam's influence continued to grow. She traveled to communities, schools, and conferences, speaking openly about abuse. Her advocacy reached thousands. Daniel watched helplessly as his perfect image crumbled, and Miriam's name became synonymous with courage and survival. No public appearance, no statement, no act of charm could undo the years of documented cruelty, and every day Miriam's voice reminded the world, and him, that surviving abuse wasn't weakness, it was power. Despite everything she had endured, Miriam began to reclaim her life. She allowed herself to feel joy again. She laughed, cautiously at first, then freely. She traveled to new places, reconnected with friends, and discovered hobbies she had long abandoned. Painting, reading, long walks in the park, simple things became miracles after years of pain. She realized survival wasn't just about avoiding death, it was about rebuilding life. Every small victory reminded her that she was no longer defined by Daniel's abuse. Her identity wasn't what he had taken, it was what she had fought to reclaim. She cultivated friendships built on trust. She traveled to communities to speak. She even started journaling her experiences, capturing the lessons and resilience she had found in herself. For the first time in years, Miriam smiled without fear. She could look into the future and imagine it without pain, and in that freedom, she understood something profound. Surviving the worst made her stronger than she had ever been. Miriam's story had already inspired thousands locally, but it didn't stop there. International media picked up her journey. Podcasts, online platforms, and global conferences invited her to speak. She shared her experiences with audiences far beyond her country, explaining how abuse can silently destroy women's lives, physically and emotionally. She spoke about miscarriages, lost wombs, and the years of silenced suffering. She taught communities how to recognize abuse early and prevent it before tragedy struck. Miriam's story became a beacon. Women from different countries reached out to her, some for advice, some for support, others simply to say, "I survived too because of you." She realized her survival had created ripples far larger than she ever imagined. Pain had turned into power, grief into guidance, and silence into action. Daniel's past no longer defined her, her future, and the futures she was helping shape was now hers to create. For the first time, she understood the full reach of her courage. It wasn't just about reclaiming her life. It was about saving lives she had never met. Years of silence and concealment couldn't protect Daniel anymore. Civil lawsuits were filed, public scrutiny increased, sponsors withdrew partnerships, organizations that once welcomed him now turned him away. Daniel tried to fight, to spin the narrative, to cast doubt, but every effort only revealed more of the truth. Medical reports, witness testimonies, and Miriam's speeches left no room for lies. The man who once walked confidently and commanded respect now faced accountability. Miriam attended the proceedings calmly. She didn't need to yell or plead. She didn't need revenge. The law, combined with her courage, spoke louder than any words of retaliation could. As Daniel's defenses crumbled in court, the world finally saw him for what he was, a man who had abused, lied, and attempted to destroy a woman's life. Miriam had endured years of trauma, but she emerged unbroken. Her voice, once silenced, had not only held Daniel accountable, but had also empowered countless others to speak up. The verdict was clear. Justice may not restore what was lost, but it could affirm the truth and prevent further harm. And for Miriam, that affirmation was more powerful than any sentence could ever be. Years later, Miriam looked back on everything she had endured. Her body bore scars no one could see. Her heart carried the memories of loss and pain. Her womb was gone. 5 pregnancies had ended in tragedy. Her marriage had been destroyed, and yet she had survived. She had reclaimed her voice, her courage, and her life. Her story had inspired thousands. Women wrote to her from across the globe, sharing their own journeys of abuse, survival, and resilience. Schools, communities, and organizations implemented programs she helped design. Lives were being saved because she refused to stay silent. Miriam had turned her suffering into purpose. Her pain had become her mission. Every seminar, every speech, every conversation was a testament to her strength. Daniel had lost his mask. His reputation lay in ruins, and the world now saw him as he truly was. But Miriam didn't revel in his downfall. Her victory wasn't vengeance. It was survival, empowerment, and legacy. She had lost much, but she had gained the most important things: her voice, her freedom, her dignity, and the knowledge that she could help others survive what she had endured. Miriam smiled, finally at peace. Her life wasn't what she had imagined, but it was more than she could have hoped for. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a warrior, a mentor, a beacon, and her story, once silenced, once stolen, would echo for generations. Thank you for watching this harrowing story of survival, courage, and the power of speaking out. Miriam's journey reminds us that silence can be deadly, but truth and resilience can change lives. If you were moved by her story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Murder Book 360 for more real life cases of crime, survival, and justice. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update. And remember, every story has a lesson. Every survivor has a